Hello everyone. We'd like to welcome everyone to the October 29th Strategic Planning Meeting. We have Ms. Fontenot and Mr. Lambert here tonight present. And for the public comment period, anyone that wishes to speak on an agenda item, they're welcome to come up and sign the agenda cards. And with that, I'd like Ms. Fontenot to lead us in a prayer and a pledge.
My pleasure. Father, as always, we come with grateful hearts, thankful for all that you've done for Ascension Parish and for our many blessings. Father, tonight we ask that you give us the wisdom and the understanding to move forward with the things before us tonight that will help and aid our parish. We always pray, Father, that you would protect, bring home safely, and end the war in Iraq, so that our soldiers, Father God, can return to the homeland. We pray for all those who volunteer for our great parish, Father God, and we thank them tonight for their service. And Father, we thank you as always that you secure our gates and our border with your glory. In Jesus' name we thank you and praise you. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, number 4 is Tree and Landscape Ordinance for Ascension Parish. This was one of the items that, as we went into adjusting subdivision regulations and zoning regulations and tightening things, this is one of the items that came up for discussion. Mr. Scott Courtwright, who's with the Planning Commission, had asked to speak to us about some of the thoughts he had on this subject, where he's very knowledgeable at, and we wanted to put this out there and see where we can go from here. So, Scott, you have the floor.
Or the podium, as it were. Well, thank you once again. My name is Scott Courtwright. I do serve in Ascension Parish as a planning and a zoning commissioner for this parish. I am a licensed arborist, Louisiana licensed arborist, that is, a degreed forester from LSU. I'm a current member of the American Society of Consulting Arborists. So as you can tell, trees and landscape are important to me. They mean something to me. Sitting on the commission, both the commissions, I have seen that issue is pertinent to me and maybe pertinent to some others, but we have nothing to sink our teeth in as a parish. Other communities across the country, across our state, have tree and landscape ordinances, and we do not have a tree and landscape ordinance. And I'll discuss some of that through my PowerPoint presentation. Thank you for giving me time, Kent and others, to come and stand before you and talk about that tonight, because we hear about trees and landscape. We see that in our community. It's the first thing we see when people come to do business in our businesses. First thing they see in your yard, your landscape. It's the most important thing, I think. People see that whenever you pull up in your yard. It sets apart, tells you what you're all about. If you have a nice landscape, chances are people have a warm and fuzzy before they even meet you. If you have a bad landscape, then people all of a sudden form an opinion about what kind of business you may or may not have. Many years ago, I helped out in East Baton Rouge Parish with their tree and landscape ordinance, and we set up a structure there. We identified trees that were Class A trees, which were the most important, i.e. cypress trees, live oak trees, the dominant native trees in Louisiana, all the way through several different classes, and we would rate those trees. And the goal there for that particular ordinance was to be able to say that native trees and dominant native trees were important to that community. In other words, things that weren't necessarily important to that community were non-native trees and trees that anybody could find anywhere. So a developer or someone that wanted to build a business park or a commercial building were steered down the road, if you will, of planting trees that were native to that environment. They were encouraged to keep trees that were native to that environment. They were almost given credit, if you will, for maintaining large, mature, native trees. In our community, it'd be almost the same thing. We're a little bit different than EBR, but almost the same. Live oaks would be our pinnacle tree here. They're stately trees. They mean a lot to us. They're a historical linkage to our past. And so developers should be given and encouraged to keep those large trees in our community, just like they are in other communities. So without further ado, I'll go on to the PowerPoint presentation real quickly. We'll run through this. Why is it important to Ascension Parish? Well, quite simply, I listed some of these things out just so we could put it in writing. You guys could have it, and the rest of the community could see that. Trees and landscaping improve our air quality. They reduce our stormwater runoff and erosion. They temper our climate, which means they reduce the heat island effect. You take a parking lot with no trees, it's very hot. Take a parking lot with trees, it's not very hot. That's what that means. Trees and landscaping help communities conserve energy. The same idea, but we can put some empirical data there. If that landscaping area doesn't exist, it's hot, we have to spend more money to cool the building, quite simply. Trees and landscaping reduce carbon dioxide through carbon sequestration, or sequestration of that carbon, which means, quite simply, without getting too scientific, carbon dioxide is put off carbon monoxide by cars, carbon dioxide by us. Trees absorb that stuff, landscaping absorbs that stuff, and gives us oxygen. If we can find a way to sequester that carbon, then maybe we don't have EPA breathing down our neck saying, hey, wait a minute, your air quality's not good. If you're asthmatic, you got to stay in the house today. So quite simply, if we can find a way to plant some trees and some landscape that's a dominant part of our environment, our infrastructure, we may be able to help that air quality issue by sequestering carbon. And also, EPA is looking at giving carbon credits to industry. Some industry are already taking advantage of that, where they will plant trees, plant a forest, if you will, for just the sheer purpose of sucking up some of this carbon, holding it into the trees, and then they get credit for doing so on an acre by acre, on a tonnage basis, really is what it is. Trees and landscaping are good for the economy, as we said already. Trees and landscaping create habitat for plants and animals. That goes without saying. Trees and landscaping improve health. Studies have shown that trees and landscaping around hospitals, your rate of successful getting out of the hospital and having a better state of mind greatly goes up versus having no landscape. And trees and landscape promote community, which certainly it does. Empirical data is somewhat hard to find, but it is out there, and there are programs that can tell us some of this empirical data. Used to, that was the problem, that we had no empirical data. People planted trees. Baton Rouge Green started some 25 years ago, and I worked there for several of those years and managed the trees along the interstate corridor, 17 projects in EBR Parish. And most of the time people said, well, people are planting trees because it looks good or it feels good. Well, that's a good thing. It's aesthetic, but you can't sink your teeth into it. Tell me some empirical data, some hard numbers that we can understand. The first one really jumped out at me. I heard at a conference several years ago. A large mature live oak tree can absorb 300 gallons of water a day. So we can equate that to, if we plant trees or leave a grove of trees or whatever during a development, if we encourage that for our developers, then all of a sudden we can see very quickly that if we can absorb this water, it's not hitting our drainage system. It's not hitting our ditches and bayous, which are already overburdened. It's being utilized. So we're getting rid of, we're encouraging, not really encouraging, but we're really not discouraging people from removing large trees and not planting trees that will help us get to this empirical number. A single mature tree can produce 260 pounds of oxygen a year. That goes back to the carbon sequestration idea, but that here again is a hard empirical number that we can put our teeth into. Basically, 260 pounds means a family of 4 has enough oxygen for a year. That's somebody did a lot of research on that, not me, but someone did. One tree can absorb as much carbon in 1 year as a car can produce driving 26,000 miles. One tree. So that's an empirical number we can sink our teeth into. Planting of trees means improved water quality, resulting in less runoff and erosion. This allows more recharging of the groundwater supply. Wooded areas help prevent the transport of sediment and chemicals into streams. And that comes from right off the USDA website. I.e., we have a lot of wetlands in our area. As a commissioner, I hear about wetlands all the time. Every development we have in this parish deals with wetlands. We just passed the drainage ordinance. It took a long time to get that thing passed through here. And we hear about drainage all the time. If we can find a way to keep and encourage some of these natural recharge areas and encourage some of this watershed management, i.e. keep the trees and the natural landscape intact, we may not have such a drainage problem. Not saying it's going to go away, but we may not have such a problem. Landscaping, especially with trees, can increase property values as much as 20%. What's really ironic is there's a piece of property in Ascension Parish on a prevalent corner several years ago, had 6 or 8 live oak trees. I was interested in purchasing that piece of property. My wife and I wanted to put a restaurant there. I came by and said, look, it's for sale. There's the property sign. I called the real estate agent about it. Real estate agent said, well, it's been on the market for quite a while. I don't know what's going to happen to it. The next week I went by. They cut every live oak tree down. Those were 50-inch diameter live oak trees, probably 70, 80, 90-year-old trees. Cut every one of them down. I called her back. I said, why did you cut them down? We were interested in doing something there. Now it's an eyesore. She said, well, it'll sell faster if we cut the trees down. That was 8 years ago. Property's still up for sale today. Trees can be a stimulus to economic development, attracting new business and tourism. Commercial retail areas are more attractive to shoppers. Apartments rent more quickly. Tenants stay longer. And space in wooded setting is more valuable to sell or rent. Quite simply, we see that in our developments. When Cabela's just came into town, look at the trees they put into their parking lot. We didn't make them do that. It's not an ordinance. They did that because, you know what? Every other community makes them do that. Look at Lowe's that just went on Airline Highway. How many trees are in their parking lot? We didn't make them do that. I sat on the commission that helped approve that development. We didn't make them do that. Every other community that they build in makes them do that. So some of these big-time guys, big box shopping, if you will, they already do that because it's natural. It's in their portfolio. But we don't make them do that. Trees properly placed around a building can reduce air conditioning needs by 30% and can save 20 to 50% in energy used for heating. This speaks directly to the heat island effect. Look at LSU's campus. You remove the 990 some live oak trees that are on LSU's campus, take them away, you have quite a different campus. You keep it the way it is today, you have one of the top 3, top 5 most beautiful campuses on the country. All right, and also probably a reduction in their AC bills if one would look at that. Issues that we face in Ascension Parish. This is no news to you guys, but I just put it on so we can see it. Rapid development leads to these 3 things. We hear these 3 things. These are our top 3 on the commission. Infrastructure, schools, and drainage. Tree and landscape ordinance, I feel, can touch all 3 of these in some form or fashion. Infrastructure. Trees are the largest part of the living infrastructure. Landscaping offers to soften the hardscape lines that are in the development, and landscaping and trees increase property value. We've already mentioned those things, and you can see in the picture behind, that's a street tree program that's in shape. That street looks very inviting. One would want to live there. One would want to walk down that sidewalk. How would it touch schools? A shaded campus means a cooler campus. For me, it's cooler in the term of hip, but it's cooler in the terms of temperature-wise. Trees on campus mean teachers have one more tool to teach kids with. Right now, our kids don't learn enough, if you ask me, about trees and live oaks and how to plant trees, and planting trees is important, and Arbor Day functions and so forth. In East Baton Rouge Parish, Baton Rouge Green did a great job of going out to their community schools, 10 a year, and they plant trees at those community schools. Those kids got to learn firsthand how to plant trees and take care of them. Trees and landscaping on the campus means schools are more attractive. Trees and landscape campus means each school is doing its part to sequester carbon. So you could really look at these on a microcosm level, that the schools are doing their part to help out in the big global picture for Ascension Parish. Reduction of carbon, drainage, filter water, the whole 9 yards. Each school could be looked at that way. And the kids can learn about that firsthand. Drainage. Trees and landscaping can help absorb water, which we know that to be true. Trees and landscaping reduce erosion by slowing down the flow of water. And wetland areas, trees and natural landscaping impound the water and help non-point source pollution issues. The picture behind was a restoration project I did in Mobile, Alabama. where we took, there was 8.5 acres of wetland areas that got damaged due to lack of planting and lack of vegetation replaced, and that is a siltation fence that's filled up with silt, and that all ended up in the wetlands. So it had to be pulled out. Same thing happens here in East Baton Rouge Parish and in our area, Ascension Parish, all the time with building. So what should we do? In my opinion, we should formulate a plan to address these issues, develop a tree and landscape ordinance quickly. We have so much development going on right now. We don't know what to do with ourselves. But we've talked about this. I know I've talked about it for 2 years, 2+ years since I've been on the commission, and the time to act is now. Some may say it's a little too late, but I think now is good. So we need to develop a tree and landscape board. In other words, we need some professionals in the community that really know what's going on. They really know about trees and landscaping. I'm not advocating that it's me. I'm advocating that we find a community structure of people that are willing to serve on such a board in such a capacity that will lead us down the right path. Mandate that new builds follow the ordinance and enforce the ordinance. You and I both know that we can make all the ordinances we want, but until we find a way to enforce them, then it's for naught, and we're spinning our wheels. We need to educate our administrators, our community, and our developers about the importance that trees and landscape do. What I just went over with you, developers and our administration, we don't really know. That's why I put it down for you tonight, because you guys, I don't expect you to know that. I expect me to know that because I went to school for it. So that's important. Also, the last idea I'll give you is becoming a Tree City USA is one of the ways that we could tap into some funding to take care of planting or replanting some areas. Becoming a Tree City USA or Tree City community leads us to down that path. There's plenty of funds available. Department of Agriculture and Forestry has grant opportunities. Tree City USA people can get $20,000 a year with a community match. $20,000 a year is not very much money, but if you get it year after year, it becomes a lot of money, and it's certainly more than what we have right now. On top of that, we would create it. Being a Tree City USA means you have an Arbor Day function and all these kind of things that speak to community. It's important to some people. People are moving into our area because schools and all of these things, they also want to move in an area that have these positive attributes to it. Nice landscaping, good tree ordinances, those kind of things. It's important to a lot of people. Lastly, I'll leave you with this, selfishly, a picture of my 3 kids on a live oak tree we took around LSU's campus. But I just said, as officials, we should be concerned with protecting our heritage and preserving our future. Our historical trees are a direct link to our past. If we're not doing anything about it, guys, and I say this to myself, being part of the we, then we can't expect the developers just to want to do it. So I have seen a couple of ordinances that have come to me in the last couple of years. They are a good start, but we have a ways to go to make them real and make them happen for us. I'm dedicated to working on that and helping that and do what I can to make it happen. I don't like when people just stand up and say, here are the problems, but they present no solutions. I'm willing to be part of that team and present some solutions that'll make it happen and push this thing to make it go. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to take those. If not, I appreciate your time and as we go through this ordinance process. Thank you very much.
Yes, Ms. Fontenot.
I just want to thank you, Scott, for coming by and presenting us this. You know how I feel about this.
Absolutely.
I started out in this community working on Revive New River. And one of the things that we discovered on Revive New River was that they had gone and cut every tree down along New River. And now we have a problem that we don't have the coolness for the fish, that we're losing our fish and other creatures that live around there because there's nothing to shade the water, and the water is 90+ degrees. So now we got to go back and plant trees. So it seems like we kind of keep spinning our wheels. You know, we do one thing and then we got to come back and undo it again. So I would be glad to work with you in the future on getting an ordinance to save trees. One of the things that when we started the subdivision regulations and stuff that I wanted to do, or that I suggested that we do, and that was to make sure that along the roads, we wanted to have a rural community that you could still have that by putting your green space up front along the road, so that when you drove by, you drove by with the canopy of the trees, and you didn't see the rooftops.
Right.
That's been 4 years ago, and I haven't seen any progress on that yet. The other thing that I thought about as you were giving your PowerPoint was the fact about the school playgrounds. I see how that the schools do just like the developers do. They cut all the trees down. And so when your children have your 15-minute recess, you're sitting you've got a big wide open space as a playground, but you can't even find a tree to get under for shade, So whatever I can do to help you, please get with me, and I'll be glad to work with you on this.
Absolutely. Let me say this too, that developers stand before us, and this is no fault of anyone. It's just people aren't educated, and I understand that. That's fine. But when developers stand before me and say, oh, yes, Mr. Courtwright, because they want to vote sometimes, oh, yes, Mr. Courtwright, we're going to do everything we can to keep every tree. Well, I know that's unrealistic. And to be honest, as an arborist, I don't want you to keep every tree. I want you to get rid of the diseased trees, the trees that are a liability, the trees that may fall and hurt somebody. I want those trees to go. I want us to define in this ordinance what it means to keep a tree, okay? I don't want to hug trees, but if we're going to keep a tree and you're going to stand before me as a developer and say, I want to keep all the trees, I know that's unrealistic. He needs to be educated. Let's keep the trees that are healthy, the trees that aren't in the way of a building. We have progress going on. And if those trees have to come out, well, then let's go back with a plan to replant some things, and not things, crepe myrtle, Bradford pear, and things that are, oh my gosh, planted way too much. Let's plant what's Ascension Parish. Let's plant some live oak trees, some nut-all oak trees, some cypress trees. Let's plant those kind of trees here. They're no more or less expensive, but they sure will live a lot longer. And on top of that, the caveat is, because the first thing you hear out of people is, who's going to maintain all the trees? Well, if we plant native trees, they maintain themselves. They maintain themselves. All of the maintenance that's going on in EBR for Baton Rouge Green on those trees, most of those are non-native species. They need a lot of care and maintenance. But if we plant native trees, do you maintain trees in the woods behind your house? No. They just grow and do their thing. So that's all I'm advocating, is that let's get smarter about it. Let's do the right thing and educate ourselves as a community.
I agree with you, Scott. And, the one thing that I think this parish is growing in leaps and bounds. And if we don't take care of the trees, we will not breathe in the next few years. In the midst of summertime, you can feel it where the air gets tight and everything. Even back 60 years ago, when 55 years ago, when I started kindergarten in first grade, they were teaching us back then that trees make oxygen.
Right.
I mean, it's right. So that's what I'm saying. So I mean, it doesn't take a big rocket scientist to figure out that we need to keep our trees and to make sure that we don't just cement everything.
Correct. Absolutely.
I definitely like to look at some, recommendations, from you, Scott, on the ordinance and start looking at it. Definitely open to moving forward with it.
Great.
Ms. Suzanne, let the record show Councilman Barriger has come in since the presentation. Also, Scott, too, on a positive note, because I think we all agree we want to try to keep the native trees here, and we want to try to enhance some things. It's just a question of how you go about doing it and doing it fairly.
Sure.
And that's what we want to move forward on. This was one of the things that was on our task before the hurricane hit, and our consultant had to move from New Orleans to Lafayette, and since that time we've lost her. So a lot of this has been lost in the shuffle since then.
Absolutely.
But we have done some things that have helped. One of the things, and after discussing with East Ascension Sportsman League, we're doing a lot of the major canals now from the center of the canal and not having to knock down the spoil bank. And so we're shredding trees in these big ditches and large canals, and we're leaving the canopy, and much as Ms. Fontenot was saying about what happened to the New River, and I think a good example is Ball Bayou. I think Kim Spray was a contractor, came in there and they shredded the trees and they maintained the canopy over that. And so we got drainage and we left the roots intact, and so you didn't have the washout and everything, and we still had the canopy. So that is kind of a policy that is being implemented now as we go through things. So that is a positive. I am very much interested in funding a tree planting program, because we do have areas in the parish that we can plant trees. That would be only enhance things. We have parish roads, and even if it's state roads or intersections that we could do something to make the parish more attractive and everything. I think that's money well spent if we can get matching funds. Also, I'd very much be in favor of looking at, in subdivision regulations, that we require the developer to plant so many trees per house, or whatever that would be. And I don't know the amount. I don't know what's adequate, and I think it's probably something, as you said, that needs to be looked at, maybe on a case-by-case basis, depending upon the grounds. But I do know that when you put subdivisions up and you don't have a single tree in the subdivision, it doesn't lend to what we want to have here. And I see that the better developers go through and they are planting trees and they're selling more houses, because of that, sure. Because that's what people want, and it's just a better looking environment. And so some kind of way that would work out. I know you've done some research on it.
Yeah, the PUDs and the SPUDs and the T&Ds allow for us to have a little bit of flexibility,
right,
to require, recommend, and be a little bit stronger in making these developers, if you will, come before us with a tree plan and those kind of things. So that's a good step, that we can do that in the PUDs and SPUDs, and T&Ds. But the smaller, more traditional neighborhood scenarios, I mean, it's almost an at will, and certainly in a commercial development, there's nothing. They can do pretty much whatever they want. Now we do say landscape buffer a lot of times in ordinances, but we don't really define what that means. What is a landscape buffer? So people can have free will to do what they want to do, and then on top of that, we have historic trees in our community. The property gets bought, and that historic tree, I mean, maybe 80, 90, 100 years, we don't know. I mean, it's an old tree. There's several developments I can think about right now that has that scenario, and there's no trigger mechanism. We're just relying on the developer's heart to say, yeah, we're going to keep that tree, or we're going to have it evaluated by a forester, an arborist. I mean, many times they have it evaluated by a landscape architect. Well, Horticultural Title III under the Agriculture Department of Agriculture and Forestry says that an arborist cares for the maintenance of trees, not a landscape contractor or landscape architect. So we've got a plumber trying to do the electrician's work in this parish. We don't have the right person skilled for doing that, and that's not the fault of the developer per se. He just doesn't really know about it. So I think it's partly my responsibility to help them become educated on that. And I passed out that to our commission and informed them, look, this is when people come before us and say, we hired a landscape architect. Well, that's great, but unfortunately he can't tell you how to protect a historic tree. Our state says no. So that policy is already in place, but the developer, that's what I said in the PowerPoint, to educate our administrators and the developers and ourselves to be educated as a whole. And so that's where I feel about that, is we need to step that up and educate those people. So,
any suggestions as to where we go from here?
Now, let me just so you know.
Yes, Mr. Sigler.
Scott was appointed by the Planning Commission to head up a commission to take a look at these two ordinances and come up with a suggestion for us.
Okay. And that's the way it normally should go. We take recommendations from the planning and zoning. I would like to see some one or two people that were interested, that have an interest from the council, just become involved to just to communicate back and forth and let you know the problems that we see from the council side as to what can be done, and maybe lend some help at that point. And so I may check with a couple of volunteers that would be willing to work with you. And Scott, we'd like to look, encourage you to go forward with your recommendations and bring us something that we can start as to see exactly where we're headed.
Right.
I think that's the proper method to do it. No one really knows where. I think if we get something to start with and put it out to the public, I think we'll get some feedback from the public as to what the public really wants,
right,
and how far we should go with this, and then we can start tweaking the document to get with what the people of Ascension Parish would want other people to think about our.
All right, something's better than nothing. We have to have a starting point. So.
Right.
Chinese professor told me at LSU, you got to get people to start planting trees and care about trees before you can get them to care about a certain particular type of tree. So this is the same concept. We have to get something out there in the books, get it under our wings, and then we can edit it and make it a living document as we see fit.
I mean, even if we start out just making developers put trees in front of their subdivisions and things of that sort, that gives us a good start, and then we can add on as we see that we need. But we would look for y'all for guidance as to what you would think, and I will try to contact enough councilmen and councilwomen. I'm sure Ms. Fontenot wants to become involved, and have a couple of people that work with you, so that we can continue to move forward and have a liaison with both.
I'll give some feedback on the Tree City USA, how we can become a Tree City USA community so we can get into that grant opportunity and get some of these matching funds that are out there every year. Other communities, I helped New Roads get there several times, so EBR's gotten it several times, and other communities and organizations have gotten it. So if it's out there waiting for us, 20 grand is 20 grand. So matching becomes, if I'm working on a document, then my time, my hourly rate is a match. Cheryl's time is a match. Whoever's time, whoever councilman, that's a match. So we can get $20,000 as a match in a heartbeat and get $20,000 cash underneath this grant if we present a project that's appropriate for them.
That sounds real good, Scott. Like I said, I'll have time in the future, and I will work with you.
Sure.
Be glad to work with you on that and some other issues like litter, stuff like that. Just to get our parish really going in a good direction. So just get with me.
Okay.
I'll gladly help you.
Any other comments? Scott, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it, and we're looking forward to hearing where the next step will go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we're on number 5, subdivision regulations, construction standards. To familiarize people with what's going on, about a year and a half ago, we started meeting with then DPW Director Bill Rue, who was acting Planning and Zoning Director, and a number of people in subdivision construction around the parish, and we wanted to increase the standards that we have to construct a subdivision in Ascension Parish, because we were having some loopholes. We were having some concerns about just how our roads were being built and whether they would last the proper amount of time, what type of sewer facilities, all of the things that goes into constructing a subdivision. It was reviewed. We had local contractors came in and met on numerous occasions with administration. I think myself, Councilman Lambert, it was in on a couple of meetings, and of course Mr. Rue on a number of occasions. And in fact, the local contractors came out with probably a stronger ordinance than what administration was beginning to look at, and the reason they said is because they wanted good developments also, and they didn't want people that come in from out of state, fly-by-night developers to come in and put something together that wouldn't last. And so they were fine with having very good regulations that made good roads and good infrastructure within the development. So it kind of went from there after our last meeting and got lost into Neverland, I guess. in administrative Neverland, and I've asked Mr. Sigler, and he's dug up the document, and we wanted to go forward with it. And Mr. Sigler, can you present it? I know this is probably 60 pages or so. Could you please tell us what everyone's looking at?
What I have here is the latest version, the last version that we have been able to locate. And we believe this is the last version that was actually, includes all the revisions. This copy came to us from CSRS Consulting Engineers, who had a lot to do with, I think, the initial drafting of it and sat in all the meetings. I ran it past Bill, and he also believes this was the latest version. The only changes from that text are, because I had not seen it and Bob Turner and our new engineers had not looked at it, we all went through it to take a look. There's very, very few suggested changes. They are all in red print. The biggest change is just that we actually number the bottom of the pages so you can find your way through it. The first change would be on 7, and basically it's just just for consistency, changing the way we word standard specifications to subdivision construction specifications so it's uniform throughout the document. You'll see the same thing on the next page. Changing the reference from saying CSRS's manual to just the manual, because it's conceivable that it will not always be CSRS's manual. The next change is on page 11, excluding traffic from pavement from at least 14 days to 7 days after placement. And the reason for that is after 7 days, the concrete's not getting that much harder. The difference between 7 and 14 days, they didn't think to travel on it. And I specifically asked both our CEs about that, and they agreed that 7 was enough. 12, again, the standard specifications wording. The only real change of any substance is on page 16, and that is, after a lot of research, Bob would like to include the ability to use HDPE air chamber pipe, meeting these specifications and installation requirements.
What's the difference in this pipe and what we're using now, Ron?
This is the plastic pipe that has the ridges on it, and the newer stuff has holes built into it so it doesn't have a flotation problem. It's not quite as rigid, and that actually works in our favor in some cases. Once properly installed, it'll take the traffic weight. It's okay for what it's outlined here for drainage type stuff. It's okay to put underneath your driveway. It's not something they would use on road crossings and that type of thing.
Is this the black pipe?
This is the black plastic pipe that's got the ridges built into it. And then this specifically requires one that has the holes drilled in it also to let air and water in and out so it won't float.
I think we had a problem with the building official on recommending going with this type of pipe.
At that time, but the research they've done now says that's pretty much accepted everywhere. Of course, we're also talking about 2 or 3 years ago when you first started talking about it.
Because we had a couple of issues with installation on it.
But you're also talking about since then. I know when we first started using it 6 or 7 years ago, we did have problems with it. But now that they started drilling holes, it equalizes itself. We haven't had those problems.
Yeah, I think that was the modifications that they were concerned about, was the drilling the holes in them, and they also have some specifications that they have to be
Bedded
so
correctly.
deep and covered with so much soil if they were going to put this type of pipe. And at that point, I believe we had agreed that that would be okay.
Right. Well, the state's now got standards for using it also, so it's pretty much accepted.
You said the state approves it?
Yeah,
Not on the road, not on a state highway.
not inside
driveway.
not for crossing, but as a
I'm talking about a driveway covered off of a state highway. You can't use it. I thought you had to go to metal.
I'm sorry, that's not my area, but I was told.
Okay. A coated corrugated metal is the only thing they're allowing on a state highway, I think.
Okay.
Or concrete?
Or concrete.
And also they've got state specs on here. Their state specification numbers on it.
Yeah, they have to follow state specifications on it.
You might want to get with Bob and with Chris on that, because they're the ones that push that. The next change is quite a bit further back. It has to do with sizes of pipe. It's on page 31. It's talking about testing sewer pipe. And the original only stopped at 10-inch sewer pipe. And of course, we know now that we will get in the sewer business more than likely, and we need to add these additional sizes of pipe for testing those. And I believe
That was it. I think that was it, huh?
I believe that's it. The only thing that we would all caution is that the last section of this deals with sewer installation, and we are working now on, and there's nothing wrong with these, but we are doing a survey of the plants that we already have out there now, and we are going to undergo in the next year, we think, a survey of all the systems that are out there in the parish. And at the end of that, we will probably want to change these specifications somewhat and start specifying actual designs of pumps and get more specific than what we've got here now for any new construction of sewer stuff.
Yeah. But basically what happened is they wanted to go through and update, modernize what the specifications were. It has never really been comprehensively modernized so that new materials that are being used would be used and guaranteed to be used properly. They have some restrictions on them throughout it. It's a lot of it was just things that were you had to be in the construction business to understand. And I know Bill and the people that were involved at the meetings would talk about it a great deal, and so I think it's a movement forward. I'm pretty well satisfied with it as we go here. I think we ought to take a look at it and see where what's the wishes of the council as to when we should move forward with it. As soon as we can, it makes our subdivisions better. That's all.
This has been adopted by the Planning Commission since 1/11/06. I think it is really past time. I don't know why it hadn't come before us before now, but if this is okay with them and it's gone through the administrative process, I'd make a motion that we send it to the full council.
I second that, but I definitely want all the full council to get a copy of this prior to the council meeting,
absolutely.
so they can do a little, because we're gonna bring this package to the council meeting. They're gonna see this and they're gonna want to say, "Wait a minute."
I'll send them out this week,
Yeah, definitely get it in front of
and
them.
it won't be on until at least 2 more weeks.
That would be at the
Second
15th.
week. That will be the second meeting in November.
November 15th. Could we get it out as this week so that they would
we'll
have
send it
2
out this
weeks
week.
to, and that way, if we need to, we can have some meetings with administration to go over any particular questions that would be brought up.
Would you prefer to send it out with the red letter version, or just change all at the same color?
Red letter.
Red letter, just what
Very good.
was done there. That way we know.
We'll get it done.
And if they have any questions, I would think
Right.
that they should get with you or somebody else. I don't think that within 2 weeks that they should come and be a big debate over this at the council
No.
meeting.
I
I
mean-
think they need to address those concerns beforehand.
This is basically housekeeping. It's something that's an update, and like I said, it was sent back and to be checked by everyone, and it was just lost in the shuffle. And we've been trying to get it back up here for a couple of months now. And I thank Mr. Sigler for finding it and bringing it to the forefront. Sure. Any other comments or anything before we look to bring it to the council? We have a motion to move it, recommend it, move forward to the council. Any opposition? Being none, this moves forward to the council's recommendation from this committee. Number 6, is subdivision advertisement regulations. Mr. Sigler.
Yes, this item is on the agenda because of the lawsuit that was filed in response to our actions on River Crossing subdivision, River Crossing PUD concept. And basically, you've got a copy in front of you of Judge Kleber's ruling, which basically says that we erred and that, in fact, when the council overruled the Planning Commission's recommendation, which is they denied their denial, they, in effect, did not approve the PUD because the approving a PUD is in effect, changing zoning, which would require advertisement and a public hearing. So basically, at this point, what he's ruling is that has not become a PUD at this point. You have denied the denial, which, in effect, is the same thing as the introduction. As you know, generally speaking, on any ordinance, we have an introduction. We have a, that was the review part. You reviewed it, and then voting the way you voted, you basically moved it to the next step, which is the introduction. Then we need to have an ordinance passed, and there needs to be the public hearing, which would allow yet another advertisement.
What does this tell us to do things properly?
Well, and this,
what exactly does it tell us?
Prior to that, if you look at the assumption was, this has never been questioned before, if you look under our PUD ordinance, under Part 5, relation to zoning districts, basically says a PUD shall be considered to be a separate zoning district in which the development plan is approved, establishes the restrictions and regulations according to which the development may occur, and may depart from the normal procedures, standards, and other requirements of the other sections of the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations to the extent provided herein. Upon approval, the official zoning map shall be changed to indicate the planned unit development concept as a PUD concept or a PUD when it's a final one. But basically, the assumption has been that while it was a rezoning, it was not a full tilt rezoning because it was contingent upon a contract. What the judge is saying that is not the case. It is no different than any other zoning case, and therefore, in fact, you have to go through an ordinance introduction, public hearing, and the advertisements as a part of it.
All right. So what this does right here, it puts us doing the proper procedure.
Well, it just tells us that in this particular case, that we needed to because it was not accepted, and then accepted by you. It did not go through the steps that it would normally go through, and that is, there's not been an ordinance yet that creates the PUD. Okay. So we would have to pass an ordinance that says that we are creating this particular PUD district.
But what do we have to do? From what I'm gathering here is that we have made a mistake in our advertising.
Well, you have to advertise 3 times, and the mistake here is that it's not ever gone through the hearing. Okay.
All right. What are we doing to prevent us from doing the wrong thing again?
Well, now we've got a logging system that logs and tracks things. Number 1. And number 2, things won't be appearing on your agenda until the zoning department says that they're ready to go to your agenda. What has been happening, evidently, for quite some time is as soon as something is passed, planning and zoning, it has moved forward because the secretary forwards to your secretary everything that happened on that last agenda. When in actuality, according to the ordinances, some items don't need to begin acting on for 30 days, and some of them for 45 days. And in the case of that particular one, we voted one day, and I believe it was 48 hours later, it appeared on your agenda.
Okay.
And in that, one of the things that happened in that case was, if you remember, some of the paperwork got messed up. That particular deal had some problems, but we have a system now that I think that prohibits that.
Okay.
There's not necessarily a reason in most cases for us to have a meeting 24 hours later before the minutes are even completed, because some of our meetings are 5 and 6 hours long.
Right.
Come back 2 days later for an action item on your agenda, particularly when the ordinance does not require, some of them are 30 days, some of them are 45 days. It would be better to wait longer, have everything compiled the way it should be, so that you have better information.
All right. So right now, administratively, you have taken care of any problems we have in advertisement,
Yes.
and we're doing it the proper way now.
Yes, and we don't believe this affects anything else.
Okay. Now, again, my question is, what is this brought to us tonight? What exactly does this do?
Well, no, all this tonight, this is a copy of what the judge ruled,
Okay.
for your information.
Information only.
This is just for your information. This is nothing, I don't think there's anything for you to take an action on, except if the developers of River Crossing want to go on forward with their development, I have not heard from them lately, if they choose to do so, then for that to become more than it is now, which is basically just a concept, we're going to have to actually go through.
The whole thing again.
No, but you've got to put an item on the agenda to create the ordinance to create it and hold a public hearing.
Okay.
And then you'd have to go through the advertisement.
You have to go through one more advertisement. Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't have to do anything.
You don't have to do. You don't have to do.
Systems in place through.
You don't have to do
administration
anything at this point, and they will initiate that, I think, on their end when they make a decision whether they want to proceed or not.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Motion adjourned, Mr.
Second.
Chairman.
A motion to adjourn, and this meeting is now adjourned.